Hello, and welcome to this video tutorial on how to add floors to a building in the Targeted Investment Protocol system, TIPS. I'm going to show you how to add floors in the system. Each floor will be done in a slightly different manner to illustrate different application features. Please note, in any examples, the content of each isn't intended to represent actual costs, required techniques, or prescribed methodologies or specifications. This exercise is simply intended to provide you, the auditor, with an understanding of how the online TIPS software is to be used. From the TIPS job list screen, in this example, we will perform an energy audit on the 20 Dubois Street location. Move your cursor to that entry and left-click. This will take you to the job audit screen for that address. To enter floors, move your cursor to the general navigation strip along the left-hand side of the screen and left-click on Floors. This will take you to the floor entry screen. Under Existing Conditions, in the Floor Details section, in the Floor Description box, enter a brief description of the floor. This will be needed for each floor area that has different characteristics. Keep in mind, the descriptions will be relied upon in a work order to help an on-site crew identify the floors in question. For this training, we will create two floors, a main house floor and a rear addition floor. In the floor description box, enter main house floor. In the gross floor area, click the calculator icon to the right of the box. Enter width in the appropriate box. For this example, we will use 30 feet. Enter the height length in the appropriate box, which for this example will be 40 feet. Click the Calculate button. Note that the gross floor area for the main house floor automatically populates to 1200. Remember, the initial calculated R value will change as each floor characteristic is entered. Click the drop-down in the floor type box and select Framed. Click the drop-down in the Adjacent To box and select Conditioned Basement. In the Framing section, under Joist, click the drop-down button in the Material box and select the material used for the floor framing. Here we will use wood. Click the drop-down in the Size box and select the appropriate framing size, which for this example will be 2 by 10. Click the drop-down in the On-Center box and select the appropriate spacing dimension, 16 inches. Now let's look at the insulation layer section. This section is optional, meaning if no insulation layer exists, simply move to the next section. In our example here, no insulation layer exists, so we will move on to the proposed work scope section. We will now address the potential work scope for the main house floor. Under the proposed measure section, in the floor details area, please note the area, which will be in square feet, and the R value boxes have populated automatically with previously entered information. In the Measures section, because no upgrade is needed for this example, we will select No Measure. We have now completed entering the work scope for the main house floor. Please remember to select the Save button in the upper right corner of the screen to save this floor information. We have now completed entering the existing conditions for floor type 1, which is the main house floor. Let's add a second floor with different characteristics. Under Existing Conditions, in the Floor Details section, in the Floor Description box, we will enter a brief description of that floor. Remember, this is needed for each floor area that has different characteristics. Please keep in mind the descriptions will be relied upon in a work order to help an on-site crew identify the floor in question. In the floor description box, type Rear Addition Floor. In gross floor area, click the calculator icon to the right of the box. Enter a width of 16 feet. Enter a height length of 12 feet. Click the Calculate button. Please note that the gross floor area for rear addition floor automatically populates to 192. Click the drop-down in the floor type box and select Framed. Click the drop-down in the Adjacent To box and select Unconditioned Crawl Space. In the Framing section, under Joist, click the drop-down in the Material box and select Wood. Click the drop-down in the Size box and select 2x10. Click the drop-down in the On-Center box and select 16 inches. Let's look at the Insulation Layer section, which is optional. In this example, no insulation layer exists, so we can now move on to the Proposed Work Scope section. Let's now address the potential work scope for the rear addition floor. Under Proposed Work Scope, please look at the floor details area and note that the area and R-value boxes have populated with previously entered information. As stated before, the R value will change when and if an insulation layer is added as part of the work scope. So let's do that. Under Insulation Layer, select Add Insulation Layer. Click the drop-down in the Installation Type box and select Cavity. Click the drop-down in the Material box and select Batt. Click the drop-down in the Material Type box and select Fiberglass. Enter 9.5 in the Thickness box. Click the Done button at the bottom of this window. For this example, no additional insulation layers will be added. In the Cost box, enter $625. This will represent the labor and material cost to add 9.5 inches of fiberglass insulation to the rear addition floor. We have now completed entering the existing conditions and upgrade measures taken for the rear addition floor. You must remember to select the Save button in the upper right corner of the screen to save this information. This concludes this training module on the addition of floors in the TIPS system.